With another Milan Derby around the corner, it's high time that we take a look into what it is that divides these two sets of fans, and what caused the literal division of the Milan Football and Cricket Club, which birthed Internazionale Milano. What's up? I'm Adrian, and welcome to another edition of Rabona TV's Roots of the Rivalry, where we get into the reeds of what is it that divides some of Europe's biggest clubs and fans. Of course, in this edition, we'll be looking at one of the most interesting derbies in Europe, the Derby della Madonnina, or the Milan Derby. Perhaps not the most explosive derby out there, but it definitely has one of the more interesting backstories. Now, if you're finding us for the first time and are interested in videos like this, or in-depth player bios, football explainer videos, and more, then consider subscribing. Well, first off, let's start with the origin of the name. Derby di Milano, that makes sense, it's Milan Derby, self-explanatory, but why the Derby della Madonnina? Well, if you were to type Milan into Google right now, I can almost guarantee that one of the first images that comes up is the famous Duomo di Milano, or the Milan Cathedral. At the top of one of the spires on the Duomo is a little golden statue of the Virgin Mary. So, the translation of Madonnina is Little Madonna in reference to the one atop of the Duomo. Make sense? Alright, let's move on. Now, if you've watched our video on the Rome Derby, you'd know that AS Roma is a product of the merging of a few Rome clubs. Well, in Milan, the opposite of that is true, with split opinions literally splitting one team into two. But we'll get to that. For now, let's start at the very beginning. AC Milan was founded on December 16th or 13th, depending on who you believe, in 1899, and at the time was called Milan Football and Cricket Club. There were 12 founding members, a mix of English and Italian citizens, though two of the main founders were actually English expats, Herbert Kilpin and Alfred Edwards. Now, when you're looking at Milan's badge, that red cross on the white background makes some more sense, given the founding fathers were English, right? Well, yes and no, as the flag of Milan is identical to that of England, similarly to other northern Italian cities like Bologna. Anyways, Kilpin was born in Nottingham, moved to Italy in 1891 at 21 years of age, where he worked in the textile industry while also playing for Internazionale Torino. In fact, it's believed that Kilpin was the first English player to have ever played football abroad. He would later move to Milan, where he would meet some other English expats, including the aforementioned Alfred Edwards. Edwards moved to Milan for work reasons also, and as one of the founding members of the Milan Football and Cricket Club, was elected as the club's first chairman. He served as such for 10 years, until 1909. As far as the choice of colors, it's said that Herbert Kilpin proclaimed, quote, "We are a team of devils. Our colors are red as fire and black to invoke fear in our opponents." And things got off to a great start for Milan, sporting-wise, as they won their first Italian title in 1901 and a couple more in 1906 and 1907. Now, this is where things took a turn in Italian football and thus led to the fragmentation of Milan into two teams. In 1908, it was ruled that Italy would have two national leagues, the Italian Championship and the Federal Championship. The first and main league would be the Italian Championship, which was only open to teams made up entirely of Italian players. The Federal Championship would allow players of all nationalities to play. So, this brought up a bit of a conundrum for Milan, a club that was founded largely by English expats, but had committed to being a club for Milan locals. Thus, Milan's chairman, Alfred Edwards, elected that Milan should enter the Italian Championship, meaning foreign players wouldn't be eligible. Many of the club members disagreed with this decision, as there were Swiss members that would be ineligible to play and thus no longer part of the club. This difference in opinion within the ranks of Milan Football Club continued on. Milan initially entered the Federal Championship for the 1908 season, the league that allowed foreigners, though they withdrew a few weeks from the start of it due to the disarray within the club. Then, March 9th of 1908 swung around, in which a make-or-break meeting between the members of the Milan Football Club led to the division of the club into two groups, those who stuck with the red and black of Milan, and those who went on to create Internazionale Milano, a club that would welcome international players in their conquest of the Federal Championship. Now the name makes sense, no? But don't take it from me, take it from the founding club members, who proclaimed, quote, "This wonderful night bestows us with the colors of our crest, black and azure against a gilded backdrop of stars. It shall be called Internazionale because we are brothers of the world." Later that year, we would see the first ever Milan Derby, which took place on October 18th in Chiasso, Switzerland. The winner of the first meeting between these two clubs? Milan, defeating Inter 2-1. Funnily enough, despite the question of whether or not Milan should sign international players being what led to the division of the club, Milan joined their rivals Inter in the Federal Championship for the 1909 edition of the league. In the one match they played against each other, Milan won once again, this time beating Inter 3-2. However, Inter would have their day, or at least their year, as in the 1909-10 season, the league was restructured once again, no longer using a knockout format to decide the winner, instead taking on a traditional season format where the 9 teams involved played each other twice. Oh, and international players were allowed in the competition. Inter went on to tie for first with Pro Vercelli, a giant in early Italian football, meaning that a tiebreaker playoff was needed in order to determine a winner. Inter dominated, winning the playoff 10-3. The football championship would take a break from 1916 to 1919 due to the First World War. In fact, just a side note for you, Virgilio Fossati, who was Inter's first ever captain and captain of Italy's national team as well, was killed on Christmas Day in 1916 fighting for the Italian army against the Austrians in Monfalcone, northeastern Italy. Perhaps as a fitting tribute to their club legend, Inter would win the Italian championship once again in the 1919-1920 season. From there would be a major dark period for AC Milan, as they wouldn't win another Italian title until the 1950s, while Inter would win a few along the way. However, if you were reading through a list of Italian champions, you may have missed them, as in 1928, Inter and US Milanese were forced to merge and went through a few name changes, from Società Sportiva Ambrosiana to Associazione Sportiva Ambrosiana to Ambrosiana Inter in 1931. It wasn't until after the Second World War that Inter changed their name back to their original, Internazionale Milano. Now, you can start to see what has separated the two fan bases already, but as is the case with most rivalries between clubs, there is typically a social and economic divide between the two sets of fans. Of course, nowadays, there isn't much to these divides as far as social status goes, but they were certainly prevalent during the onset of the two clubs. As Inter was the team that was the first to accept international players, they had access to not only the better players, but to wealthy expats within the city. Wealth attracts wealth, and so Inter were seen as the team of the upper class or the bourgeoisie of Milan. Their fans were wealthy merchants from Milan and abroad, and largely white-collar workers. In fact, in their early years at the San Siro, Inter was sometimes referred to as the motoretta within Milan, due to the fact that their fans were often wealthy enough to travel to the stadium by motorcycle. The Milan fans, no, they weren't rolling up to their club's matches on motorcycles. Instead, their more blue-collar, working-class fan base would take public transportation, which led to Milan being referred to as the tramvi, as in the tram. Of course, nowadays you'd be surprised to hear either team referred to as one of these ancient nicknames, but they do provide a good insight to the divide between the two sets of fans early on in their history. At that time, Inter were dominant on the pitch, winning 5 titles before Milan had even won once in the new Italian championship format. The 3 that Milan had won in 1901, 06, and 07 had of course been won when there was only 3 or 4 teams competing. On top of that, Inter and their fans were winning financially in life. Of course, money isn't everything and you should find your true happiness elsewhere, but anyway. Part of the reason as to why these differences in class culture at the club has been somewhat mitigated in the more recent history is due to the difference in ownership, with Silvio Berlusconi adding some flair and Hollywood, as some like to call it, to Milan, while Massimo Moratti kept the club a little more grounded in a sense, for lack of a better word. Now, of course, with both clubs currently being owned by foreign investors, you can kiss the monetary differences goodbye. Now, if you were to compare this derby with the Rome Derby, this one is of course a little less fiery, and thankfully, a lot less likely to get violent. The reason for that being is that in Rome, given that league titles for either Lazio or Roma come along extremely infrequently, there's almost more of an emphasis on winning the derby. In Milan, however, with both clubs currently sitting on 18 league titles each, the emphasis shifts more to trophies than it does to getting one over on your city rival. Now, don't get me wrong at all, there has certainly been fan violence during the Milan Derby before, with a supporter tragically getting stabbed to death in the past. But due to this, the two sets of fans have adopted an armistice of sorts to put an end to senseless violence. However, that doesn't mean that there still isn't a hate for their city rivals on Derby Day, as the passion from the 80,000 supporters within the shared San Siro Stadium is something to behold, and something that shouldn't be missed when Derby Day rolls around. And that's it. That's all I'll say on this matter. I hope that I answered any questions you may have had regarding why Milan split and the reasons for the division between the two sets of fans. If you enjoyed this video, then a like is always appreciated. And if you want more videos like this, then all you've got to do is hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. I'm Adrian, and I'll see you in the next one.